Zach, you were going to take the discussion, I think, about the problem of evil. You know, if God is all good and all powerful, why does evil exist in the world? Abu Muhammad, you were going to take the discussion about we cannot say that there is a before the universe because time began. So therefore, to say that there was a before the universe implies a time before time. So we'll take that one. Hatim, I can't remember what your topic was. Brother Hatim.
I think you have a mute.
You're on mute at the moment.
Yeah. It was the topic on proving that the first cause must have a will.
Oh yeah, that was it. That's good one. Alhamdulillah. So which brother wants to start first? So the format's going to be the brother's going to spend answering the question. Then I think we should ask him questions. Yeah. And maybe critically appraise, his response and ask him questions. I know Abu Muhammad's got this recording, but I'm going to ask him not to put this up online or put it up on YouTube or anything like that. So what happens here stays here. There's not going to be anything other than that. And the reason why is because there has to be an opportunity for us to be able to practice, to discuss, to even make mistakes, and not fear that this is going to be broadcasted to other people. And so it gives an opportunity to have this discussion here. So after the brother gives his answer, we're going to go to, inshallah, a Q&A with us. We're going to ask him questions, and then we're going to maybe give feedback as well. Yeah, so I don't want this session to be more than 10 minutes. If it's longer than 10 minutes and some brothers still haven't, then we'll just do it for next week, if that's okay. Yeah. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Yeah. I've done like 4 or 5 papers, articles. I read a chapter of Brother Hamza's book, like Hamza Zordzis, right? So I'll compile a bit from here, important stuff, right? A bit from here, a bit from here, a bit from here, and I'll compile. I've written it in a few pages, right? So I'm gonna present it to you. So if you have a question,
I'm gonna put mine on mute. Yeah, Yunus, I'm going to put mine on mute, and then I'm just going to pass it over to yourself. So after you've gone through your mini talk, we'll, inshallah, ask you questions, yeah? Okay, Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum. So here is my answer. So before I start talking about the miraculous nature of the Quran, I would like to throw some light on the historicity of the Quran. As we all know that the Quran is a book which Muslims believe to be the word of God, a final revelation which was revealed to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam in Arabia in the 7th century. And this period was known as an era of literary and linguistic perfection. The Arabs at the time would celebrate if a poet rose amongst them. It was their oxygen and their blood. However, when the Quran was recited to them, they were dumbfounded and stunned by the silence of their great experts. They could not produce anything like that of the Quranic discourse. Commenting on the inimitability of the Quranic challenge, Al-Rafi, which is a Quranic scholar, states that when the Arabs encountered the Quran, they found no difference in its terminology and the terminology they use. However, the way these terms were put together and even the way the letters comprising these terms were joined were all novel to them. That is why they failed to imitate the Quranic discourse and consider the style of the Quran is something unlike that which they were familiar with. And hence, it would be impossible for them to produce anything like this. Al-Rafi states, with a great resemblance between the Quran with its inimitable style and the system of this vast universe whom scientists have examined from every different angle within various perspectives, yet it is still to them a new creation, far-fetched final goal. There are some objections made by the critics of Islam that the eloquence of the Quran is purely a subject to judgment. That's I'm sorry, I don't know. That's a valid point. However, it can be disproven so easily by asking the question that if the language of the Quran was purely a subjective point, why were the pagan Arabs living? Why were the pagan Arabs willing to accuse the Prophet ﷺ of being possessed or making magic or being a soothsayer? Anyone who reads the pagan arguments could easily see that they had to resort to ad hominem fallacies against Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Some people say that the works of Shakespeare is inimitable. So what makes the Quran so superior? Even though the Shakespeare is unique in its poetic composition, however, his works are not considered as inimitable. In his poetry, he uses something that's known as iambic pentameters, and since the blueprint of his works are available, and it is not surprising that people like Christopher Marlowe, John Fletcher, and others have produced the work similar to Shakespeare. The inimitability of the Quran is a deductive argument whose conclusions would be sound if the premises are sound. So I'm going to make a deductive argument. I'm going to put forth my premises and conclude, right? The premise one is the miracle is something which lies outside the productive capacity of nature. The Quran lies outside the productive capacity of nature, therefore the Quran is miracle, right? So what I have to do is to prove to you that the premise 2 is true to make my argument sound and valid. Why does the Quran lie outside the productive capacity? Because the Arabic language, just like any other language, has a structure. It is broken down into prose and poetry. Now the Quran, what Quran does is descopes these known forms of the Arabic language. It is in the Arabic language, yet it doesn't conform to these known forms. This is why the non-Muslim Arabists like Arthur J. Aubrey, Professor Hamilton Game, Professor Bruce Lawrence acknowledge the fact that Quran is something which cannot be imitated. Professor A.J. Arthur J. Aubrey states that Quran is neither prose nor poetry, but a unique fusion of both. What I'm saying is, like, we have the 28 letters of Arabic language and finite grammatical rules, and yet when we exhaust all the possible combinations, yet we cannot produce anything like that of the Quran. So this proves my point. This proves the premise too. Like Professor Oriental Studies Martin Zamet said, notwithstanding the literary eloquence of some of the pre-Islamic poems, the Quran is definitely on a level of its own as the most eminent written manifestation of the Arabic language. Thank you very much.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. I'm going to open it up to any questions that the brothers have regards to his particular question. So his particular question was that Shakespeare also wrote inimitable. Wa alaikum salam. How are you, Muhtasin?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you, Abu Muhammad?
Muhtasin, we're in the middle.
All right, sorry for interrupting. Carry on.
No problem, bro. No problem. So, inshallah, Muhammad Yunus has answered the question in regards to the Shakespeare's also is inimitable, also unique. Yeah, so why does the Quran have a uniqueness and therefore inimitability that gives us divine origin? So, brothers, if you've got questions that you want to ask to Abu Muhammad with regards to his presentation, some of the points, please feel free.
Abu Muhammad?
So, Muhammad Yunus.
Subhanallah.
Please don't be shy to ask him questions.
What specific example did he show?
So what was
Sorry?
that, Abu Muhammad? Didn't
What
quite catch-
specific example did he show that the Quran, Shakespeare is not like the Quran?
So
Okay.
I didn't understand the question.
I'll explain. So Abu Muhammad, he asked, what specific example can you give that shows that Shakespeare is not like the Quran?
For example, I said that we have 28 finite letters of Arabic language, and we have got the rules, the structure of Arabic language. And when we exhaust all the possible combinations, like in Arabic, we have some principles of the language, like concentrism, chiasm. I'm not an Arabic like a linguist expert. This is what I've heard and studied, right? So when we exhaust all of these possibilities, when we put all of these principles, the language, the Arabic letters, and it's what did I say? Yeah, when we put all of these together, we still cannot produce anything like that of the Quran. That's why it makes the Quran unique. Even after having the blueprint of the Quran, blueprint of Quran, and have the Arabic language, yet we are unable to imitate the Quranic discourse.
My question is specific in terms of, let's say, if you bring an ayah from the Quran and compare with Shakespeare writing, and you show that this specific sentence here cannot be, imitable because Shakespeare, it's not compatible in terms of language, in terms of eloquence, in terms of different criteria that you establish that Quran is unimitable. Does that make sense to you now?
Can I butt in?
I think
I'm asking for specific text in the Quran that you can show
the
that.
Quran.
Well,
What I'm
if we
saying
look at
that the composition of the Quran, the whole Quran is miraculous, as claimed or testified by the experts of the Arabic language. This is what I'm saying. When we take the works of Shakespeare, the blueprint of Shakespeare, we are able to produce or imitate the works of Shakespeare as it has done by the people like Christopher Marlowe and John Fletcher. This is what I read, right? So, but we cannot do the same with the Quranic discourse. That's what makes it a miraculous text.
Can
We
I ask-
have all the naturalistic options available to us. Like we have got the Arabic language, we have got the structure, we have got the principles of the language, and when we put all these combinations together, nobody, like in my readings, have testified that they have been able to imitate the Quranic discourse. Like we have got experts of the Arabic language, Eastern and Western scholarship, testifying that Quran is a miraculous text.
So I
But
think
the case is not the same with the Shakespeare.
Hussein, I think, had a question.
Right, I've got some questions here. To be honest, obviously I came a bit late, so I'm not quite sure.
So you
When
missed his
guys-
whole presentation. But go on.
Unfortunately. But look, do you know what it is? So I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here. So like when it comes to imitation, like there's so many things that we can't imitate. So for example, like a rap, someone like David Wood was giving an example about a rap. Just because I can't imitate the rap doesn't mean he's divine. But just to stretch the example, like there's so many people have natural talents and we can't imitate them. So does that mean, they got some special powers or something like that? So how would you respond to that? Just because you can't imitate doesn't mean it's true. That's my question. How would you respond to a skeptic who says something like brings that? Yeah.
We had Brian asking us the same question. Do you remember, Zach?
Sorry?
I don't know any specific way of answering this question, right?
Yeah.
This is what I had. Like, this is what I have read. Like, after having like we have got objective measures. We have got like things which are there, which we can explore, right? The Arabic language, the principles of the Arabic language. Anyone could go out and study the Arabic language, right? Anybody could go out and study the principles of the Arabic language, the structure of the Arabic language, right? So the challenge of the Quran is very explicit and clear. It says like one chapter like the Quran and prove the whole situation wrong. So what you have to do is to prove the Quran wrong or incorrect is just to make one chapter like that of the Quran. You've got the principles of Arabic language. You can do it. You can learn the language and come up with anything like that of the Quranic discourse.
Okay, but just to point out here, so let's say you had an Arab poet, or it could be any poet, and he was the best at poetry in his society, and no one could imitate his poetry. So would you still say then therefore he's, I don't know, divine or inspired, divine, you know? Because I think this is, I think, like, you know, I was speaking to Adnan Rashid as well, and he was saying that this challenge, he interprets the verse as something else. He thinks it's more the impact that the Quran has had. Well, obviously, I don't want to go into that, but even then, again, the challenge itself is not.
We say that Quran is a supernatural revelation. Quran is a supernatural text, right? So what it means to be a supernatural text is something which doesn't have the naturalistic explanation. Right. So in nature, we have got the language of Arabic. We have got everything like grammar rules. We have got Arabic letters, right? We study the Arabic language. We learn the grammar of Arabic, right? And even after that, if we are not able to produce anything like that of the Quran, it raises a question like what is this text all about, right?
Okay, so then just last question here. So let's say the Quran didn't claim to be divine and it was a masterpiece. Would you then affirm it's still the word of God based on that?
No, if it was not divine, if it was not a divine text.
No, if it did not claim, let's just say we have the literary masterpiece here, the Quran, like we have everything, but it didn't claim
that's the main claim though. That's the Quran, like miraculous claim which we Muslims are making. That's from where we start.
Okay, inshallah. I think Yunus has spent we've good 15 minutes or so actually probably on that question.
I would like to have feedback, like if I were not able to answer.
Yeah, well, I'll give you my thoughts with regards to how to answer some of these questions. The Quran miracle one can be a bit tricky, and it's tricky from the point of view that if you don't come from an classical Arabic background, so you understand classical Arabic and certain subjects like ilm al-balagha, then it becomes very difficult as to actually understand and explain what the nature of the Quranic miracle is. So what I would say is this. What you mentioned about Shakespeare's iambic pentameter is really important, because what you're basically saying is that Shakespeare created this new form, which was the iambic pentameter. 5 beats per sentence or line, the iambic pentameter. So it was unique for the time, but people were able to replicate it. Regards to the Quran came, which was unique for its time because it was neither poetry nor prose, and this is what I'd probably explain. I'd say that we have al-bihar, which are 16 different meter forms of poetry, and we have prose, which are 2 different forms in the Arabic language, saj'a and mursal. And I would then explain that how Quran came as a unique style, which differed from the 16 forms of bihar and the 2 forms of prose in the Arabic language. So you've got 2 aspects regards to the miracle. The first aspect is to try to meet its stylistic form. So the fact that the Quran has a unique style, and we can explain a bit further with regards to what the unique style of the Quran is. The second thing that I would then explain is the issue of balagha, which is to do with rhetoric, and how balagha has certain rules to it. So one of the rules is basically subdivided into 3: science of meaning, ilm al-ma'ni, ilm al-bayan, and ilm al-badi, which is science of meaning, science of speech, so whether it's literal, metaphorical, and badi means embellishment, making it the rhetorical devices, as they call it. So there's 3 aspects of it, and what the Quran does is that it uses each one of those aspects in order to create the greatest amount of meaning in the shortest construct. Yeah. So the Quran is unique from two aspects. One, its genre, yeah, which was unique to the Arabs, and people still haven't been able to match it. And secondly, its balagha, its ability to express the greatest amount of meaning, yeah, by the use of these two things. And so when we apply that to Shakespeare, as you mentioned rightly so, Christopher Marlowe, some of Shakespeare's plays are actually meant to have been written by Christopher Marlowe himself, yeah. So there's debate as to whether who actually was the author of some of the plays in Shakespeare, and there's other aspects with regards to Shakespeare that you can break down. The fact that the English language, the vocabulary of the English language, was actually quite limited during Shakespeare's time. Yeah, and actually we have more words now than Shakespeare had. That's why Shakespeare repeats a lot of his words and repeats a lot of his sentences throughout his plays, because he doesn't have enough vocabulary to give the expressibility. So technically, we have more ability to express greater meaning than Shakespeare. What Shakespeare had was that he was the first to do it. What Shakespeare didn't have was the fact that he was inimitable. Nobody could match it. Yeah. So somebody who's first to do it is seen as a genius. People can then, as you said, retrospectively deconstruct what they've done and then rebuild it. So that's my general feedback regards to that.
If somebody doesn't have the profound knowledge of these, like the Arabic language, like how would he substantiate the claim he makes to the atheist that Quran is a miracle?
So I'm explaining, when I explain the fact that you've got Al-Bihar and Sajr and Mursul as the different
things like
forms,
that. Yeah.
I'm explaining that by explaining the fact that there is a objective criteria. When I explain that you've got Balagha, Ilm al-Balagha, subdivided into three aspects, Ilm al-Ma'ani, Ilm al-Bayan, Ilm al-Badi'. Again, I'm explaining the fact that there is a science behind this. So it's not like something which is any subjective, or it's just somebody who listens to it and he likes it. There are rules, basically. There's rules in the Arabic language and the Arabic grammar. There's also rules with regards to stylistic features and also balagha as well. So I'm explaining that there are rules, and then what I would also explain is what you also mentioned, which was the fact that the authorities of the Arabic language, yeah, they testified the fact that the Arabic language is of the highest level. Like, for example, the magicians of Fir'aun, yeah, not everybody at the time of Fir'aun knew what was capable by human beings, what was magic, what was capable by human beings and what wasn't. But the magicians were, like the Arab linguists, they know what's within the human capability and what's outside. And they were the ones that testified, like the magicians of Fir'aun, that this is mu'jiza, and therefore obviously submit to it, or at least testified that this is something that human beings cannot produce. So I would rely upon, one, explaining it being objective by the rules, and secondly, by the authority of the Arab linguists and professors who testified that it was correct. Using those two things, the person cannot say this is subjective, and he cannot say actually the people who are the best placed to judge the Arabic language didn't judge it as a mu'jiza. I'm going to move on because we've only got a short period of time. So was there somebody?
Yeah. I'm just gonna put my camera on. I've got 2 books actually on this topic, but I've not actually read it. But I was just gonna ask, have you read these 2? Any of these? One sec. Can you see my camera?
I can't see your face.
Yeah, I'm hiding.
Blurry,
What does it blurry?
But it's shadow hiding.
So what? I've shown myself finally. So the book's called "The Miraculous Language of the Quran: Evidence of Its Divine Origin." Sam, and there's another one by Muhammad Abdullah Draz, "The Quran: The Eternal Challenge." Is it blurry my screen? Or can you see?
It is blurry, but yeah. I've read the second book that you mentioned.
It's one?
Okay, Hamza. It's all right.
Yeah,
so the second one, the Eternal Quran.
Right. Okay.
I don't think there's very good. To be honest, there isn't that great of books and works out there on this particular topic. So it's a difficult topic. But I think the first thing is to try to explain it as an objective material, objective criteria, and secondly, to reference it back to those people who have got capability in the Arabic language. Right, I'm going to move on. Zach said that he wanted to go next. So Zach's topic is going to be on the problem of evil. I'm going to mute my speaker. So.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وصحبه أجمعين ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي عن والحمد. Okay, we're going to talk about the problem of evil that comes up very often. The main issue that we need to get at is that we have God on one hand, and then we have creation on the other. And when we talk about this, there are some things that need to be explained or understood first. So if we're going to talk about God, we have some qualities that we are going to have to accept at the beginning. And the qualities that are being accepted here is a God who is omnipotent, who is all-powerful, and who is all good. Now, I might have my reservations with what it means to be all good. We can come back to that later. But I will accept that in order for God to be God, he must be all-powerful. Good and bad, or good and evil, since these are subjective, that gets into a little bit more of a tricky thing. So we'll move on to that. We'll come back to that later. Now that we have an omnipotent God on the one side, we need to talk about what evil is, and if we can have an objective definition of evil, because if we can't have an objective definition of evil, it's hard to talk about this topic of God creating evil to begin with. So first, I would go down the line that what we call evil is completely subjective and based on our own perspective. Why? Because I cannot point to a physical object and call the nature of that object itself evil. To give an example, somebody might say that rape is bad, and I'm going to use evil and bad now synonymously here. Somebody will say that rape is bad. I can say, yes, that's true. Rape may be bad, but what then is what is the attribute of rape that is bad that makes it different than, let's say, normal intercourse that is consensual, and then from an Islamic perspective is what we would call halal or permissible. In terms of act, strictly physically speaking, there's no difference between these two acts. The difference, what makes rape rape, is the lack of consent. So there's nothing that you can point to physically and say that this act is bad from the physical side of the act. What we're getting at is now a subjective understanding of this act is bad because there's no consent, and the lack of consent is considered something that is bad or evil in this sense. We could go on to another one. What's death, murder? What's the difference between somebody who dies from natural causes or whatever, and somebody who is murdered? Again, murder is always bad, just like rape is always bad. But murder is defined as the unlawful or the killing of a person without right to do so. At least that's how we would define it. So if we're going to add that definition, of course murder is always bad, but physically from the most strictest of point, there is no difference in the act itself of dying and murdering. The only thing is that we have now an intention that came in here, which is the same in rape. You have an added intention. Now, if we're going to talk about whether intention is a created being that you can physically point to, something that has an external existence, that will get a little bit tricky because we can't really point to an intention. These are all now very subjective things. So, does God create the act of a person dying? Yes, he does. Does God create the acts of everything? Yes, he does. But where is the but in this notion, the act itself can't be a judgment value from the human side cannot be placed on the act. The act itself, that stems from the person's own subjective perspective. Now, that doesn't mean, now we can go a step deeper and say that we don't like it. We don't like murder. We don't like these things. Yes, I completely agree with that, and we don't want them to happen to anybody. But going from there, now we have to take in the other thing. So we talked about a God who is omnipotent. If we're going to talk about a God who is omnipotent, we have to automatically bring in the existence of the afterlife, because we will talk about this from a theistic perspective. Once somebody has talked about God, he can't then change the goalpost and say, well, the afterlife, we're not going to deal with that. Well, if we're talking about God, we have to talk about, is there an afterlife? And if there's an omnipotent God, there must be an afterlife. Why? Because from the most basic of levels, God's power of memory, for lack of better words, is absolute, which means that God cannot forget, because forgetting is a lack of power to remember. So our existence being based in, this is in quotation marks, in the memory of God, or in the knowledge of God, perhaps is a better way to say it, is going to then be eternal. God cannot forget us. So our existence will continue on for eternity. How that will manifest after our death is completely different. Now, if somebody wants to say that, well, we don't know if there's an afterlife, you can't say this, whatever, you've already given at the very basic premise that there is an omnipotent God. So we can't change the goalposts now and say, well, he's omnipotent, but there might not be an afterlife. No, there will be an afterlife in some form. How that will be is another issue that I don't want to get into now. So we have the afterlife, and with that, now we can we can expand our frame of we can expand our horizons a little bit wider and look at this. Now, we all as humans accept a certain level of pain as being good if it results in something beneficial for us. The basic example of exercising. When I exercise, I feel pain. Okay, I exercised recently and now my muscles are sore, but I'm doing this and I'm happy to do this because I know that I will be stronger a little bit later. We could talk about this on different levels. Okay, to learn a different language, it's really hard to do that. It causes a lot of stress and a lot of, at least, psychological pain in one sense of the word. So is that good or bad? We can't. So we accepted that some pain is good, with the caveat that it leads to something better in the future. So now, if we're going to talk about God, the afterlife, and evil being created or not being created, or the existence thereof, I might not have proven it to the extent that I wanted to here, but I've tried to prove that evil is not a created thing itself, but a perspective that the observer himself has. So the evil that we see going around, that we perceive around us, then is it really bad for us if there's an afterlife, is the question now. So let me collect my thoughts, I'm sorry. So it's if in the afterlife we're going to receive some compensation for whatever we have experienced in this life, plus interest, and there is evidence for that in the Quran. I'm going to go into that now, just for a point of reference. This could be critique, about is the Quran the word of God? Is this true or whatever? But if we're going to take the Quranic narrative as being for the sake of argument now, then God does call those people who go into heaven the people who receive increase, faizun. Okay, and it's interesting that even in Turkish we use the word faiz to mean interest in our daily language. So, we, from the Quranic perspective, those who enter paradise are not only given a compensation for what has happened to them in this world, whatever has happened bad to them, they get that compensated, so they get whatever back, and then they get interest on top of that. Okay, so it's like if I work out really, really hard, all the effort that I put in there is compensated. Okay, because the next day I'll feel a little bit sore, but after that, eventually I'll have muscles and I can lift maybe 3 times what I could normally do. I've gotten interest from my actions, and I call that good. So no matter how bad the thing is that I have perceived in this life, I'm getting compensated, plus I'm getting interest for it. And so I think that falls into the greater, this becomes now whatever we experience in this life, what we perceive as to be bad, not that evil is created by God, I don't accept that, but whatever we perceive to be bad is actually now a result to a much, much, much greater good. Okay, something that we want really to acquire in our lives. And by life, I don't just mean life in this world, I mean life in the next world too. That's all I'm going to share for now. There might be a lot of polls, and I'm wanting to hear your critiques of me. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair to Zach. Any questions for Zach?
Yeah, Zach, I think I asked you this one before, and I already know the answer, but I'm just asking for the sake of the audience. What if somebody says, what if God, he just, it's not about his memory, he just doesn't care to bring us back to life, maybe he just doesn't want to.
Okay, so I think it's not, so I think what you're asking is, it's not that God will forget us, it's just that he will not make us conscious of our existence after death. Is that, did I understand the question?
Yeah.
Okay, so to address that, that goes into a much deeper explanation of which, if we've determined that God is instead of, let's say, all good, all merciful, if he's all merciful, then there has to be a recipient of that mercy for that attribute of mercy to continue. Otherwise, that mercy then turns into oppression. So it kind of, this will join together with other attributes of God to help prove that too. But even if we're not conscious of whatever happened to us after we're dead, then nothing mattered. And so you can't really say that anything that happens in this life is good or bad to begin with. So that's just completely gone.
Okay, like you're differentiating between existence and being aware of your existence, right?
Yeah. So okay. My being aware of existence is I've taken that for granted in this discussion, and that's based on other attributes of God that I've confirmed previously.
I have a question. You claimed God to be powerful, right? So if God is so powerful, why didn't he create a world where sufferings, pain, things like these didn't exist? Why didn't he create a world where there is just pleasure, where there is just, relief? Why did he create intentionally a world where all of these things had to happen?
Okay, that question doesn't really have much to do with God's evil. I mean, that's a completely different field. It's a good question, but it's not. It's kind of out of the scope of this specific discussion, and at least I think it is. If others disagree with me, then please disagree.
I will say he did. It's called paradise. You just have to work for it.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I definitely. But is this question? Does anybody else see this as falling slightly out of the scope of this specific point here?
Yeah, I was thinking that. As soon as I heard the question.
Oh, since
I
we are
was thinking
talking about evil, the existence of this
And the
of
power.
evil in this world in the context of an all-powerful being. So if a being is all-powerful, why did he create a world where sufferings, like words like these, things like these, exist? That's my question. If you think it's
Maybe-
outside of
Yeah, maybe if I could add as well, maybe to that question, what the atheists are saying when it comes to the issue of problem of evil, they're saying that there is a logical contradiction, like saying squared circle, when we say there's an all-powerful, all-good creator and that evil exists. Yeah, because either God is not all good and therefore allows or creates whatever they want to use the word evil, or God is not all-powerful, even though he's all good, but cannot stop the evil from taking place. So they're saying there's a logical contradiction with these two attributes applied to the creator. Now, what Muhammad Yunus is asking, I think is a good question, and to a certain extent, it does fall outside, but it will be a question that atheists will ask, which is that why didn't the creator create a perfect world in origin where there is no evil? Yeah. And so I think that's a quite a valid question that they would ask.
Yeah,
and maybe
He
would
did
need to
though.
be
It's called
answered.
paradise.
I mean,
He did though.
paradise.
It's called paradise.
Yeah. So
But
is that? But even before we have
an answer-
paradise,
I have
I
an
could just
answer
say,
to the question.
go on.
Yeah, I have an answer to a longer answer to the question. I don't want to take all the time. I mean, so that's kind of why I tried to slide it over real quickly out of the scope. It's a good question. It will be asked, but I don't want to take all the time to respond. If that's
I
fine.
have a question though.
Go on, Abu Muhammad.
Okay, so you mentioned good and evil is subjective, correct? It's based on the perspective of the person who's observing things in nature, correct?
Yes.
So something being subjective does not necessarily mean it's false, though. How will you respond to that?
Something being subjective. What? I didn't catch the last part.
Does not necessarily mean that it doesn't exist.
Does that necessarily mean that it doesn't exist, even if it's subjective from our perspective? So if morality is subjective for us, does it necessarily mean that objective morality doesn't exist? I think, is that your question, Abu Muhammad?
More, the fact that morality is subjective doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Our rationality is subjective. Our consciousness is subjective. So doesn't follow. Therefore, it doesn't exist.
This will go on both. This will answer both Muhammad Yunus's and Abu Muhammad's question. Then it gets into the idea of, okay, the reason why we consider these things good or bad is because God. If we've accepted an all-powerful God to begin with, we've accepted that He has programmed our conscious. And so if He has programmed not just to accept that this is good, this is bad, then there is now a harmony between what I like and what I don't like and what He commands. So this also gets into the name of Hakim in 2, because it's not just that God is all-powerful. To say this, we've had to add a lot of other different attributes of God in this that we haven't really talked about. This conversation has gotten very big, which it will when we talk about evil. But, okay, so you're right. But why do you consider murder to be unjust? Okay, you can't stop yourself from thinking that. I mean, or you not liking injustice. I mean, oppression. Okay, if it were in my hands, I would just change my whole nature to not mind being oppressed, and then it wouldn't be oppression to begin with, right? So this gets into Abu Muhammad's question here, and then we'll get into Muhammad Yunus's question. Okay. if he created all of this world with a perfect goodness going on here, we wouldn't even recognize that it was good, because he would also then be, or he would create our consciousness in a certain way that would accept that there's no bad to begin with. And then we wouldn't understand what good or bad is from an experiential point of view, experimental point of view, which would lower the level of what good and bad becomes to the level of the angels. And this is where we get into the difference between insan, melek, besher. And so where the besher falls under the angel, the melek, we would just be at that level. They know theoretically, but it's not an experimental or experiential form of knowledge. And so it's at a lower level than what the human has. So we could say the shortest answer to that is they wouldn't accept this. The atheists wouldn't accept this at the very beginning. You have to explain this out. Do you like being a human, or would you rather be an animal? Because if a guy likes to be a human, then he shouldn't have a problem. He can't have a problem, actually, logically, with experiencing what he calls suffering.
Any other questions on that? No. Okay, so we've got one more. I think we might be able to get two. So it's between Hatim.
Let me go.
And Hatim.
Wait, no. Let me go.
Come on,
Let me go.
Let Hatim go.
Okay, go ahead.
It's been first session. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm going to put mine on mute,
really,
then let you go ahead. Sure. Okay.
Okay, sure. So my topic is on proving that the first cause must have a will. And this is the conversation that most people skip out on when they're in Speaker's Corner. Because like they're usually like too stuck on proving a first cause and like just getting past all the hurdles there. But this is a conversation that hasn't been had by a lot of people yet. Even in like professional debates and stuff, you'll still hear like first cause arguments, but not necessarily why it must have a will. And that's like the number one objection. And it's really, really frustrating because every single new debate, like we have to reset everything. Like we have to hit the reset button, start from the very beginning, and no one ever gets to this part. And this is the really good part. So like assuming now like we prove the first cause must exist, like there must be an ultimate beginning because infinite regress is a contradiction, assuming all of that right now. So like the next question is that like what must this first cause like necessarily possess? Like what attributes must it possess in order to be the first cause? And there are a few that are controversial and a few that are uncontroversial. Everyone would accept it. So it must have caused us, obviously. It's in the name, you know, it's considered the first cause. So like it must have caused us. It must have possessed power or the ability to do so. Because that's a like ingredient of causation, is to have the energy or power or the ability to act in a way. So it must have acted in a way where we were caused, or like it must have actioned us into existence, so to speak. So another thing that it must have had the ability to initiate the action from within. So like there cannot have been another thing external to it, which is making it bring things into existence. Why? Because if there's an external thing that the first cause relies on to help it cause things into existence, it's no longer considered the first cause. So it must have been something internal. And like you cannot say that it's something external, because that would also be a contradiction in terms of the definition of like what the first cause must be. So then like you're stuck with a dichotomy here, or like it's not really a dichotomy yet, but so like assuming like it does not have a will, right? We know that it has the ability to initiate, right? And so like if it doesn't have a will, then the question must be asked, like what is making it initiate then? And the only thing the atheist can say is, hey, like it comes from within and we don't know what it is, right? So and if it doesn't have a will, this is problematic because this is just a like it just is answer. It's just like saying it's just a case that it initiates. We don't know what it is, and so this is our brute fact, is what they would say. This is the part where explanations end. Like there's no other explanation besides this one. This is the most common rebuttal I've gotten from atheists when I've used this argument. And so the problem with this argument is there's actually a better explanation that completely explains how the first cause brought things into existence from within, and it's that it possessed a will. And why is this? The definition of will, the Old English definition that you can find just by Googling it, and like you might have to click a few buttons in the definition window, but it says that will is one with the faculty, like the faculty to decide on and initiate action. And so we already know that the first cause has the ability to initiate, and this is just the faculty by which it decides to initiate. And this is how, like, this is the spark that gets it going. And the reason why this is important is because power is not enough. And I forgot to justify this part earlier. I should have actually justified it earlier. But like just having the power to initiate, or like just having like the power to action something into existence is not enough to actually create anything. Why? Like just imagine for a moment that like there's a warehouse, and this warehouse has hundreds of thousands of nuclear warheads, right? That is a lot of potential power there. And all that power is completely useless if there isn't a trigger to activate it. So you have the potential energy, and you don't have the actualization of that potential. And if you don't have the actualization of that potential, it'll never do anything. You know, it's just going to stay there doing absolutely nothing for all of eternity. And this is why the ability to initiate is absolutely critical. And so, like when you ascribe a will to this, it's no longer just a it just is explanation. It's no longer that it gives it like more. It still keeps it general. It's not saying that like this will must be Allah, or that the will must be Yahweh, or this will must be like Johnny Bravo, or any of that. It's just keeping it just like completely general in saying it must possess a will. Why? Because it must like decide on and initiate action from within. And this is how we know that something has a will. And so the other problem is that let me see. I think that's pretty much it. So here's another objection that I've heard. So another objection would be, but wait, like we could say, instead of just saying it just is, and that's how it created, or that's how it initiated everything, we could say that it was just on chance. And how do you define chance in this? Like in this case, it's just saying it is just possible. So like it's just a possibility that it happened, that the first cause initiated, and that's how it initiated. And like that's actually not saying anything at all, because like I could like replace it's just possible that it initiated with will, and that's how it initiated. You know? So like if you're saying it just initiated like by its ability to initiate, then that's that's not actually saying anything at all. And shoot, I'd like to open the floor out to objections, please.
Okay, bros. Any questions, points that brothers want to raise? Muhtasin, please ask a question. You're on mute.
Just give me 5 minutes because I'm just eating. So yeah.
Just ask your question while you're
I got
eating.
a question.
Okay, go on.
I got a question.
I'm going to ask first.
Okay, if a person said the cause is not really a personal agent, is more of a mechanical agent or mechanical cause, how will you respond to that? Like an example, apple growing on apple tree is a mechanical causation rather than a willful causation. So how will you respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's important to bring out the example of how we differentiate between living things and non-living things in reality, just existing. You know, how do we know that a rock is not alive, although a rock sometimes moves, and a cat is alive, and a cat, like, it's stationary at points? You know, how do we know that one is alive and one isn't? In a sense, the reason why we know that the cat is alive, and this is going to seem like a unintuitive explanation, but it's because it's causelessly causing. So like there's nothing causing the cat to move externally. You know what I'm saying? It's doing it by itself. Now you could like analyze that further and break it down and say, well, no, it's the cat's like desires from its genetic makeup and its history and all that, which is making it do like whatever it does. But like and like when you analyze it as like how like we originally came up with this concept of will, it's because it's causelessly causing. It's doing it from within by itself. And something that's mechanical or something that's like a rock, like we wouldn't say it has the ability to initiate anything. You know, things are just happening to it. So like when you bring that question and say that, hey, it's just a mechanical thing, you know, like we automatically must ask the question, well, how is it doing what it's doing then? And you can either answer two ways. You can say that there's something external to it or something internal to it. And if you say external, it's not the first cause. If you say that like the mechanical thing, there's another thing internal to it, which is making the first cause, then you could ask that question again. What's that internal thing? I'm like, what is making that other internal thing and making the first internal thing like make the first cause? And it's going to eventually lead to like an infinite regression where like nothing's ever caused because you're bringing forth this mechanical thing that like we know by definition can't do anything by itself because that's just how we understand the world. So like that argument doesn't really work because you never have any causation or like any action take place because there would just be like an infinite regress of waiting for that like actualizing like that actualizer to actualize that potential. Now, and this is why like the atheist must concede and must say it has the ability to initiate from within. And the only word that we have in the English language like that I know of is will, or you can say something like another word that's like related or like is related to will, but it's always gonna be that it it acts from within by its choice to do so. So it like the cat, for example, it moved because it chose to move. You see what I'm trying to say? It's different than it was it was moved by this other thing that made it move in like an abstract way, not like in an actual way. But this is just what like when you're analyzing things purely on like their concepts alone as opposed to like the reality of cats and like the reality of like nature. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. I hope that answers the question.
Okay.
Muhtasin, have you got the question yet? Have you finished eating? 1 minute. Any other brothers? Any other brothers?
Brother Yunus? Question? I guess no one has a question.
Nobody has a question. We're gonna have to move on, Muhtasin.
I mean, I could say something that's like real quick while like Muhtasin waits.
Right.
I think Muhtasin wants to ask now. He's finished eating.
Just washing my hands because I just finished from that. So this we were speaking about this on WhatsApp the other day, and I was just wanted to ask you. So this causation argument is not applying. Is it applying to the universe, the beginning of the universe, or what is it applying to? So that's my first question.
Yeah. So I think like Mustafa, you're asking whether this is like this could be considered a cosmological argument.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends how you position it. Like, you can position it like the first cause argument from the point of causality. Like, this isn't really like the topic of discussion because I'm talking about will, but yeah, you could make it a cosmological argument by talking about like the nature of a cosmos, or you can just keep it like just like completely like cogito, purely just causality alone. And like we know causality because it's a first principle that we need for knowledge. So that's how you can build the argument from there. But like it really depends how you position it, though, man. Like you can make it a cosmological argument if you want to, I really try not to, because then it always goes to the Big Bang, and then I'm like, you'll have people like that guy Phil in Speaker's Corner say, well, like there's like over 13 different models of the Big Bang, and so which one are you talking about? And it's just like, okay, well, I mean, like I'm not gonna go through every single one and say that like, hey, like this scientist is wrong and this one isn't, you know.
So you're saying you can apply it to literally anything, like a tree, human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can do that. I just apply it to our thoughts. Like, hey, like our thoughts, like one thought leads to another thought.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like there's like there's like causality there. Like if we don't perceive like our reality in like a causal way, then like we couldn't have any knowledge. And so even if you were someone like Hume or Kant, or I forgot who challenged this idea of causality and say, hey, how do we know that it actually exists external to us? Even if you did say something that crazy, you can just say, well, like there's nothing else for me to go on. You know, like how do you expect to have any knowledge if you don't believe in this? And if you don't believe in this, you're crazy. You know, like you can just call them crazy, because like there's really no other way to attain knowledge. You know.
Right.
Okay.
I had one more question, but I forgot what I was going to ask. Yeah, that's it. I remember. I think Abu Muhammad asked, though, I think it was probably something similar. So, obviously, your topic was specifically about will, but I want to ask more related to that this first cause. Why can't it be whatever, like an atom, a matter, or energy, or something metaphysical, but not God, you know? Or,
Singularity.
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Okay.
Energy.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and say it. I answered the question earlier. I'm gonna try and say it again, just like real quick, and try and add a bit more information. You can always rewatch this later because Abu Muhammad's recording. But so essentially, like the way that we know that a thing is living or a thing is not living is from it's moving by itself. In other words, it's causelessly causing, meaning like there's nothing else that's making it cause except like by itself. And so if you want to say, yes, I believe in a natural first cause, or like a first cause that like does not have choice, or like does not have a will, and it's just doing what it's doing, and we don't know how. Then like you're free to say that, and that's the most common objection, is that hey, like we can just say we don't know how it's initiating action, and like let's just say we don't know, it just does, you know. And like the way that I would challenge this, it just does. I left a syllogism in the chat you guys can look at, because I had this atheist friend who he kept saying, hey, you know, like this is our brute fact, or like this is our explanation that needs no explanations, you know, because like we came to an agreement that like in every single worldview, you are going to have an explanation that needs no explanation. And his explanation was like, this is ours. You know, our explanation that needs no explanation is a first cause like this. It does not have a will, and it initiates, and we don't know how. It just does, you know? But like the problem with this, and that's the point of like my syllogism. If you look at like the first syllogism 1A, you know, like for the question, like why do apples like they fall from trees? You know, like you can either have two answers. You can have an answer like it just does. The apple falls because it just falls. Or you can say the apple falls because of like a more meaningful explanation, right? Like those are two options there. So if you just say it just does, I have enough authority to say that as he does, because and like if he's just going to arbitrarily like choose like this first cause that has no will as his necessary fact, then I can do the thing for an apple. You know, I can say that the Bible is true just because it's true. You see what I'm saying? Like it's and that's not how it works. If there's a better explanation, and an explanation is better if it has more meaning. If there's a more meaningful explanation, then we go to it no matter what. You know, because anything is better than it just is. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yes. Okay.
And so this is a logical syllogism. It's an argument from consistency. So I'm checking their consistency here. And so if this person is telling me that I'm going to make this one my necessary fact, then I'm going to say, well, how come you don't make the apple falling from tree just because it is, as opposed to because gravity and space-time curvature and all this BS that they have? You see what I'm saying? Like, if they're going to invoke and like arbitrarily that like this is our necessary fact, I want to know why they don't do the same for the apple, or like why they don't do the same for like why giraffes have long necks, as opposed to just saying because of evolution and natural selection. I'd be like, well, because it just does. You see what I'm trying to say? But like the reason why they don't is because they know internally that like there's a more meaningful explanation, and this is why they gravitate towards that. And it works the same for us. Like there's a more meaningful explanation as to how the first cause initiates. It initiates because it chooses to, because it wants to, because of whatever. But it's because ultimately it has a will, and like it and like again, like the definition of will is literally just that. It is the faculty by which one like decides on and initiates action. You see what I'm saying? It's just causelessly causing. It's causelessly and like choosing from within to cause. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So like that's an explanation, and it's a more meaningful explanation than it just does. And this is why like they should move towards that if they were consistent. But like most of them aren't consistent anyway. So that's how I handle that one.
Can I ask one final question? Sharif, give me permission.
Go on, Bismillah.
The thing is, I've noticed that now when like we're using these arguments, we like if the first cause, we basically think that we basically have to stop them from using infinite regression because it'll defeat our argument. But I think now, because now today I was reading a book called The Last Superstition by Edward Fesser, and he's basically using Thomas Aquinas to show that even if an infinite regress is possible, it still wouldn't disprove the idea of God. So what do you think about that? Do you basically think that defeats the first cause argument? Obviously.
No, you know, there's a few Muslims. I think like that's like the Athari position. It's a position like I personally, I've heard it. I'm not personally convinced, and I can only speak of things that I can justify myself. I can't justify that position
Because
that's why I don't do it.
You see, in the book, what it's describing is that, of course, if the infinite regress is dependent, is contingent on Allah who's causing it, each movement, each change, then obviously this doesn't really seem to be a problem. Because what Thomas Aquinas is asking in this his book is what is keeping them moving, what is causing the changes. So I think the same causality that you're talking about can still be applied to the infinite regression, because the question that to ask is what is causing the infinite regression.
Yeah, see, the problem with, this is like, I know, like, I think Zach might have an answer for this. So, like, I'm going to ask a question for Zach right now, because I'm really curious about that.
Sure.
Like, my problem with it is that, like, you know that the first creation of Allah is like the Arsh, right? Like the throne, right?
Yeah.
So, if you have a first, how could you say that, like, I mean, like, if you're saying that, like, everything else has like an infinite it goes infinity into the past, or like eternally into the past and eternally into the future. Like, how is that possible if it doesn't have a beginning?
You're right. By the way, I don't agree with that position anyway, but I'm just saying it can still be used for God, that's all. Yeah. I agree with you.
Does anyone know the answer to that? Because that's a question that I've had for a while, and I've never heard it justified from somebody that believes in that.
Ask Abu Muhammad.
I think maybe going slightly off topic anyway. But Hatim, I would maybe say maybe a very simple example towards your question, though, in terms of will, is we generally say that if you've got a temporal effect but an eternal cause, then this implies a will. Would you not use that one? So if you've got a temporal effect but an eternal cause, isn't it? Because if the cause is eternal and it has no will, so it has to always create, then the effect would be eternal. Yeah, so the cause is eternal, the effect would be eternal. If the cause is eternal, and the universe is temporal, I began to exist, the effect therefore it implies there's a will. Yeah, there's a choice over creation. That's how I would address and answer that particular question about will.
You would answer my question?
Yeah.
Like the topic that I was talking about, or like this particular question that I just asked like a few moments ago? No,
the topic that your topic on will. That's how I would that's one way I would answer it. Yeah, I know Imam
I'm sorry,
Ghazali
could you
mentions
break
that.
that
That's where I
down?
got it
Sorry.
from. So,
Could you break that?
yeah, so Imam Ghazali, he explains this point about infinite will. So he's talking about and he's talking about the fact that we can ascertain that the creator has a will, has a choice. What I think Abu Muhammad talked about as a personal agent, yeah, i.e., self-aware creator that chooses to create, as opposed to a creator which is not self-aware and is forced to create. And the way he explains it, he says that because we know the universe began, and because we know the universe is an effect of the creator, and therefore the effect is temporal, yeah, i.e., has a beginning in time. Yeah, it's not always existed, it's not eternal, but the creator is eternal. Yeah, so if the creator is eternal but the effect is temporal, then that implies that the creator chose. And he gives the
Oh, I see
example.
what you're saying.
So he gives the example of the sun rising, because every time the sun rises, it causes light. Yeah. If one day the sun rises and there is no light, and then suddenly light comes, then it implies the sun is choosing. Yeah. But the fact that the sun is rising and it's automatically by necessity creating light, there's no choice over the matter. Yeah. So if I switch on a light bulb and sometimes it switches on and sometimes it doesn't switch on, then we're asking the question, what's causing it? It's not the switching on. Ghazali, I think, mentions why was it created that at this point and not before, after. Yeah, as well as those points as well. It's in the incoherence of the philosophers. Okay, have we got time for Abu Muhammad?
I got time.
Maybe 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll let him. But Muhammad, one thing is your mic's not very good.
My mic?
Yeah, your mic's not quite. It's not very clear, but so you're gonna have to be extra clear, inshallah. But I'll pass it over to Abu Muhammad. I'm gonna put mine on mute so we can inshallah listen to Abu Muhammad.
Can you hear? Okay. So Bismillah. So I'm answering the Stephen Hawking objections regarding to his claim that God could not create a universe because there was no time for him to do so. So before I proceed, I wanted to first unpack his assumptions and position to better understand what is it that he's claiming and position. So Stephen Hawking did believe that the universe had a beginning, but it didn't require cause. Why? Because he believed cause must precede the effect in time. So he believed in something that we call temporal causation. To put his argument in its syllogistic form, it would be cause must precede the effects in time only. There is no time prior to the beginning of the universe, meaning the origin of the universe. Therefore, the universe cannot have a cause. So by extension, theism requires God to be the cause of the universe. The universe cannot have a cause, therefore theism is false. So by looking at examining his argument positions, I will argue that his first premise is based on a false dichotomy. Why? Because there are different types of causality that do not necessarily include time. One of them is called atemporal causation, which would be, for example, God created the universe simultaneously with it coming to existence, not God creating chronologically. So God is a causally prior to the universe, not chronologically prior to the universe. Second type of causation would be logical causation, where there's a logical relation between premises and conclusions. Third type of causation would be order causation, where A comes before B, B comes before C, C comes from before D, so on and so forth, without no lap of time in between them. Fourth type of causation would be a mental causation, whereas when you imagine something, automatically the image pop in your mind without no lap of time in between them. And the fifth type of causation would be efficient causation, where is an agent who brings about an effect through his choice. Aristotle did mention four types of causation, of which are not really relevant to my argument. So my argument would be, if I can demonstrate by analogy that cause and effect can coexist simultaneously, then its first premise is falsified. or is proven false. An example would be this bottle right here. I hope everybody can see this bottle. So if we imagine internally past, we have the bottle sitting on top of the paper and it's causing indentations inside of the paper. We can see that the bottle is causing the indentation in the paper from eternity past, even though there's no lapse of time between them. So by this example, it shows that atemporal causation is plausible or is possible. Therefore, its first premise can be falsified. So my argument would be, if atemporal causation is plausible, then efficient cause simultaneously can bring the universe into existence at the point. If atemporal causation is plausible, therefore an efficient cause brought the universe into existence at a specific point. Now, the example that I just gave you, just to illustrate another one, would be if we imagine this paper to be non-existent, and we imagine the universe to be existent. At a specific point in time, a specific point, the universe is coming to existence with a willful agent bringing it into existence. So by this analogy, it can be argued that God brought the universe simultaneously when the time began to exist. So the next point to regard in argument is that it's time, because the whole premise is based on time is a necessary component of causation. I will argue time is not a necessary component of causation. Why? Because time does not cause anything. Time is just a measurement of matter in motion. So an example, so a syllogism that I formulated to prove this point is, if time is the essential property of all causality, then time will cause something to take place. But time does not cause anything to take place, therefore time is not an essential property of all causality, as I demonstrated with the bottle and the paper. So imagine, I got this example from Brother Hatim, where we see a paint standing still in our mind. The moment that we think about it, we can see the paint in our mind standing still. There is a causation link between the imagination of the paint and the thinking of the paint. But the paint is standing still, where there's no motion, where there's no time involved. So we can see from this simple example that we can have a causation without no time involved. So to deconstruct his argument, I would say, first, since he does agree that the universe does have a beginning, but it doesn't have a cause, so we will assume what his arguments are and follow out to a conclusion that will lead to a contradiction. So premise one, if the universe doesn't have a cause, then the universe would have begun to exist. But the universe did begin to exist, which he accepts, therefore the universe must have a cause. If we assume its premises, then we're going to lead to a self-contradiction. Now I will deconstruct his argument, I will reconstruct my own argument. If the universe began to exist, which he agreed, then the universe has a cause. The universe did begin to exist, therefore the universe does have a cause. So the conclusion shows that he can have his cake and eat it. If he accepts one, then you're going to have to accept the other one as follows. So to finalize everything, deconstructing this argument and reconstructing my argument, in a basis form, cause and effect cannot exist as time, outside of time as we know it. This is the crux of his argument. Time as we know did not exist in a primary singularity. Since time did not exist, cause did not exist, hence no effect took place. In the absence of causation, there wouldn't be any change in the state of primary singularity. Therefore, primary singularity should remain in a mutable state and the universe will never come into being. But we know that to be false. Why? Because the universe exists, a primary singularity exists at the beginning of the universe. As time we know originated from this singularity. For this to take place, singularity must have underwent some changes. and changes imply causation. Therefore, this cause must be outside of time in order to bring this change in a temporal state. Therefore, a cause can exist atemporally, meaning a cause can exist outside of time. So this will finalize all its argument that the cause, there cannot be no cause outside of time is totally false, and as demonstrated that time is not a component of the causation, therefore its conclusion does not follow. And one specific thing that I do want to highlight, which is if we agree that the universe has a beginning, doesn't have a cause, the implication of that is that the universe is supernatural, because something that begins to exist doesn't have a cause is supernatural by definition. Or he undermines science because science premise on causality. So in the way that either if he accepts that the universe has a beginning, it doesn't have a cause, then he's gonna have to throw away the he's gonna have to throw the cause the science out of the window because cause science premise on the cause. So this will be my final conclusion here. I'm gonna end here. Any questions?
Okay, bros. As Hamza, Jazakallah khair. Any questions or points that brothers want to raise?
Yeah, I could. I would just say that like your last claim, I don't think it would undermine science if they said that the universe was eternal. I think it's illogical for them to say that, but I don't think it would undermine science because it wouldn't be
Not
special.
eternal. The universe doesn't have a cause.
Yeah,
But science
I mean,
based
if the
on cause and
universe,
effect.
yeah, well, if the universe existed eternally, it wouldn't have a cause. But like, that doesn't necessarily mean that like the things in the universe doesn't have, like that doesn't mean that like there's no causality in the universe.
Okay. So you're saying that science is the study of the natural world, which includes universe, correct? Which is premise on what?
Natural world.
Cause, which is
That's a
premise
good
on
question.
cause and effect. Which is premise on what? Cause and effect. Now, if you said that I accept that there is a causation, which is science, and said that the universe doesn't have a cause, then you self-contradicting yourself in a way, because you're applying special pleading to one specific field. At the same time, when it doesn't suit you, you say, well, this particular thing doesn't have a cause.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's only special pleading though. I'm like, it's only considered special pleading if they don't have a justification for why, like, they're pleading this for the like the universe and like not this for everything else. But I agree with you though, because like their justification, like you already dismantled their justification anyway. So I agree with you on that point. That like it would be considered special pleading only because like their justification isn't actually like justified, I would say.
Okay. Any more questions? I know Brother Shadow got a question.
To be honest, Alhamdulillah is very great. I think you structured it very well. So I really can't think of any questions because I think you've just destroyed him. So yeah, I don't know.
I guess.
Any other
I guess
brothers?
that's it.
What I would suggest, one thing that I always add in this question or answering this question is to demonstrate which scientists actually believe what occurred before the universe anyway. So they contradict themselves. Like, for example, Hawkins himself, he contradicts himself. Penrose Hawkins. Penrose now talks about a universe before the universe, or they'll talk about prior states of the universe, or they'll talk about Big Bang, Big Crunch. Yeah, so there are previous universe. The universe there aren't multiverses. There's only one universe, but it's existed amongst different periods. Yeah, as well as obviously multiverses, membrane structures, etc. So. Even though they will say when it comes to the question of creator, oh, you can't ask that question, but then suddenly they will apply it when it comes to the issue of science. Yeah, there's a good quote by Penrose who actually said that initially he believed you could not ask this question, and now he believes that there was a universe prior to this universe and that we can detect the universe through microwave background radiation or whatever. Yeah. So that's what I would just add But otherwise, alhamdulillah, what you said is pretty much on point. And I think the essence of what you're saying is this: is can we conceive of causality outside of temporality? If I can conceive it, yeah, then you can't say it is a logical impossibility.
Right.
No.
Well, Mohammed, make sure you send that me as well, right? Your notes.
I
Yeah.
think it-
Yeah,
I think,
do send it to me as well.
Yeah.
Please, I was about
Okay.
to say this.
I think it's
Inshallah.
important if the brothers here could actually send whatever notes that they have on that specific question, maybe write something up. It doesn't have to be like detailed written things, and just send it on, inshallah. So and that will help as well in terms of helping us to structure our thoughts and ideas around these topics whenever you write things up like that. Anyway, next week, which was going to be the final session of this, was going to be a session of where we have one brother takes one opinion, one view, like the Islamic view, and another brother will oppose him. Yeah, will argue against him in a debate format.
I want Brother Shadow.
Yeah.
So Abu Muhammad versus Muhtasin. Is that what I'm getting? Yeah.
Brother Shadow, yes.
Depends
Yeah,
what the topic is, though.
Well, I don't know
Okay.
what topic we could take one on proof of Quran, one on proof of God. We could take one on Sharia being, some people arguing that it's barbaric. Age of Aisha radiallahu anha. We could take.
Hey, how come this is the last session? How many have you had?
We had one before last week, this week,
Right.
and week after. If brothers want more, we'll have more, but we have to structure it properly. But the idea was to have this session to be one where brothers present, so they get the ability to get that flowability in the arguments, and maybe some critical feedback, asking questions, etc. The second, the final session was going to be a debate format, get two brothers debating each other. And like I said, when I've done this in the past with brothers and normally do it face to face, like people like Wahaj, Muhtasin, Wahaj, don't you? So he's been involved in these types of sessions where they've done debates and things like that, and it helps to refine the arguments as well.
Wait,
Shall I go?
I want to do one on the miracles of the Quran.
What, you want to do a debate on that?
Not a debate. Yeah, discussion first, like a presentation first, and then a debate maybe on this topic or even a different topic. But
Well, because there's 5 of us here, we'll let you do that one, and that means the other 4 brothers will then have to pair up for and against. Is that okay?
okay, sure. Because what I want to speak about, inshallah, is first the numerical miracle of the Quran, and then the unique aspects of the Quran, and other miracles of the Quran. So I'll for next week, inshallah.
Oh, is it okay? Is it okay if I ask? I wanted to answer a question that like Mustahsin he asked earlier. It was a logical question. It was about like the Quran's inimitability. I think Mustahsin said that even if it's inimitable, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's miraculous. And I think like what he was trying to say is like it could just be that like we just don't have enough knowledge right now, and perhaps in the future like we'll have enough knowledge to basically recreate it essentially. And I want to. I'm like, is it okay if I answer this question really quickly?
Sure.
Now or later on next week?
Just now.
Hatim, why don't you leave it and
Yeah.
you argue for that, and we'll get a brother to argue against you in
Okay,
a debate
perfect,
format. Yeah, be good.
Okay, inshallah.
Okay, wait. Sharif,
It's gone.
so when will I do my presentation and when will the debate
Why don't you debate against Hatim?
about this about which topic?
Yeah, about this topic. So
But I wanna
Hatim's going to.
I don't know much.
To be honest,
I don't know much
Don't
about
run
the
away.
Quran directly.
I want to deliver the presentation as well, and then I want critiques from it. Oh, we could even just do a debate. I could present it, and then we could do that as well. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're now
You
going to
do the
debate from the
presentation.
non-Muslim perspective.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and
Well-
Hatim wants to debate it from the Muslim perspective. Is that okay?
Sure. Well, yeah. Okay, that's fine. We'll talk about it. I'll message you later then. We'll see.
Alright, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Oh, Sharif, it's gone.
Yeah,
I think he dropped. The call dropped. What you saying?
Huh?
But he was talking about doing more. Just the last lesson. What do you guys think about that? Should we continue or
Continue, man.
should this?
This is my first one. You know, we need to have more. So yeah, we can have a couple more.
What do you think of Zaki? What do you think and Hatem?
Well, I think we can continue. I mean, that's all cool. I'm just, like I said, I'm traveling, so I don't really know my own program. But, you know, if it continues, then that's perfectly fine with me, inshallah.
Okay. Muhammad Yunus?
Yeah, inshallah, it's pretty good. It's beneficial. It's fruitful. So let's continue.
Inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
Yeah, we can do one next
Flash.
week. Inshallah.
Inshallah. And it's kind of good. It's gonna expand our minds, right?
Yeah, because I want to mention some points. I've got some books here. I'm guessing you guys have read the Eternal Challenge, right?
Which one?
By Abu Zakaria.
Yes.
Excellent. Alhamdulillah. And then I've got obviously this book as well. Astonishing Facts of the Quran. And then I think I've got. And then other two books I should
Finish it?
Sorry?
Did you finish it?
What? Finish what? Have I finished this?
Yeah, reading this book.
To be honest, no, actually, no, I have not. I've read most of it, you could say, that's it. So I just basically extracted the most important points that I need.
Brother Spencer, I need to go. I need to pray Isha. It's 11:30 here, so I apologize.
Inshallah.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Hey, guys.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam, guys. I gotta go as well. Bye.
Okay, okay, Hassan, I'll message you maybe later because I've got to speak to that atheist tomorrow. Yeah, okay, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And before I go, Muhammad Yunus, where are you from?
I'm from Kashmir.
All right, mashallah. So you live there as well?
Yep.
All right, okay,
Y'all kind of look like,
And
man.
you? And you?
I'm here, obviously, originally from Pakistan, but I'm born here.
Okay, that's great.
So make sure this part doesn't go into YouTube, Abu Muhammad, yeah?
Yeah.
Nah.
This is private, yeah. So then,
Yeah. People finally gonna see the brother's shadow, man.
Alhamdulillah, I have built my confidence.
Alhamdulillah,
Whereabouts in Kashmir are you from?
I'm from Srinagar.
So that's
I'm
where,
from the Indian occupied part.
that's where my great granddad's from originally.
Really?
Yeah.
Were you born there in London? England?
I was born here, but my granddad, or actually, it might even be my granddad. They were originally Kashmir from where you said they're from there.
Really?
My surname is Mir, M-I-R. So I'm guessing you must have heard that. Mir.
What?
Mir.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's more like from the Kashmir side where you're from. That's where my
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know.
from. So yeah.
So we're genetically close. Yeah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Yeah.